About 5 years ago, I was given the book Love and Gelato for my birthday. A few months later, my high school batch was lucky enough to have a senior trip to Italy, just like Lizzie McGuire, and Florence was one of our stops. My friends and I did our best to visit all the places we read about in the book, and though we couldn't find hidden bakeries, we still got to see the Duomo, Ponte Vecchio, many more, and enjoy good food and, of course, gelato. Years later, here I am lucky enough to interview the author herself, Miss Jenna Evans Welch. I'm Max, and when it comes to what's happening, I'll serve you the facts. So please take this hour to sit back and relax because this is New Wave. So joining me today from the other side of the world is one of my favorite authors. She's the mind behind the Love and series, which includes Love and Gelato, which has recently premiered on Netflix, Love and Luck, which my friend luckily borrowed, and Love and Olives, which was released most recently. And then coming at the end of this month is her new release, Spells for Lost Things. So everyone, please welcome Miss Jenna Evans Welch. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for accepting this invitation. It's been a long time coming, so I'm so happy that we can finally do it.
Me too. Thanks for sticking with me.
So great. So aside from your new book that's coming out at the end of the month, how are you and what have you been up to recently?
Honestly, I've had a little bit of a break, which has been
That's
wonderful.
great.
I spent some time this summer in Hawaii with my family.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we rented a house for a summer or sorry, for a month and spent every single day just playing in the water, relaxing, resting. I think it's been a very stressful time for a lot of people, and I've been writing very consistently and very hard for about 8 years now. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I really needed a big break. So that's what I've been doing, is resting before this new book comes out and
Yeah.
kind of pausing before I decide what to do next.
And what better place to rest and relax than Hawaii?
Yeah,
The
it's so
beach.
beautiful. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. I'm jealous. Okay. So now let's go back to the very beginning. You were a reader before you were a writer. I would read like interviews of you saying that you read a lot of YA books, and there came a point where the next book you wanted to read was the book you were going to write. So tell us a little more about how you got your start and the whole origin story of being an author.
Yes, absolutely. Um, so that's close. The story is close. So I was such a heavy reader as a child. As soon as I discovered reading, I remember thinking, why does anyone do anything else? And I just read and read and read. I read everything. I honestly identify more as a reader than a writer
Oh,
because a
yeah.
reader is who I like truly am. I just loved reading as a child. And I remember around the age of 11, I felt like I'd certainly read everything in my house multiple times,
Yeah.
and I felt like I'd read everything in my children's library. So I remember going to my local library with my mom, and I asked where the books for teenagers were.
Mhm.
And I'm 36, so this was in the 90s. And there was I remember this tiny little shelf.
Oh.
YA was not even sort of what it is today. It really
Yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of an emerging genre.
Mhm.
And I remember being so disappointed both by the number of books that were there. And like, I could read through that in, a month. And also the types of books. I remember thinking all these books are about cheerleaders, and I don't want to read about cheerleaders.
Yeah.
So, I remember now I can kind of put words to
Mhm.
it. I think what I was most disappointed about was that I had read about all these like wonderful girls, like for example, like Matilda, Roald Dahl's
Oh,
Matilda.
that's so cute.
Like just kind of this like spunky, adventurous young girl. I also really loved the book Harriet the Spy. I loved Harriet.
Yeah.
My cat is named Harriet because I
Oh,
loved
that's
that
so
character so
cute.
much. I wanted
Mm.
those girls to come with me into my teen
Mhm.
reading. Like I wanted older stories. I wanted a little bit of kissing, but I wanted that same adventurous spirit. And I didn't feel like it was waiting for me when I reached that age. So I actually have a really clear memory of telling my mom, one day I'm going to write the books that I wish were right there on that shelf. One day I'm going to write
Oh.
books for teenagers. So I decided at 11 that this is what I was going to do. I started attempting it when I was about 22, and I wrote a bunch of
Mhm.
terrible books, which is how we all start.
Yeah.
And then published Love and Gelato. I was 29. So it's been kind of a long time coming, and it still kind of like makes me catch my breath a little bit that I did it, that it's actually
Yeah.
happened. Like it's always felt like the plan, and I'm so grateful that it actually worked out and that it's reached so many readers all over the
Yeah.
world. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's touched many lives. And I think you did a very good job crafting that strong female lead for the YA genre. I see that influence now that you bring up Matilda and Harriet. So that's so cool. Plus, your world building, describing Italy, Ireland, Greece. That's one of the things that I really loved about your books, especially the past 2 years when we couldn't travel. So, for these books, were these places that you got to visit before? And what made you choose them, if ever?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's something, trying to create a really strong setting has been something I've
Mhm.
spent a lot of time and worked really hard on. So thank you for saying
Mhm.
that. So I actually went to high school in Florence, Italy. I went to
Oh.
an American international school. I was there for 2 years, and if you've read Love and Gelato, so you'll
Yes.
understand this. But I had a friend who grew up in the American cemetery right outside of Florence.
Oh.
So it is a cemetery that is actually American land.
Mhm.
And she was a runner, and she'd get up in the morning and she would run through the headstones. And I
Ah.
remember at like 16, 17 thinking, oh, that would be such a good
Mhm.
setting for a YA novel.
It is.
Um, so that's where I got that original idea from. And then when that book was successful, it was actually my publisher who said, "What if you kept going with this theme of travel?" And as soon as she
Yeah.
said it, I got like chills all over. I was like, "Oh yes, that is exactly what I'll do." I think it made sense for me as a person to write
Mhm.
about travel and the YA experience
Yes.
together, because that was my experience as a teenager.
Mhm.
I'd grown up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I really hadn't
Oh.
traveled much. And then I had this experience where I moved to Europe, and it just expanded my mind in so many ways. And so for me, like my teen years are very closely associated with travel.
Yeah.
So it's been really natural for me to write about travel for teenagers.
Wow. Okay, that's so cool. And then yeah, like I said, now's like the perfect time to read books like this about travel, especially for us here. And that actually brings me to my next question, which is how much of your personal experiences or how much truth is there in the stories you write? Because of course, like these are fictional characters. And I see now that in Love and Gelato at least, a lot were things that you got from your life. But what about for your other books? Was this also something that was seen?
Um, so I also traveled and
Mm-hmm.
explored Ireland and Santorini, Greece,
Mm-hmm.
to write the novels. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the same experience where I lived in them.
Yes.
Um, I definitely draw on experiences, particularly for the first novel. Um, but most everything else is made up, honestly.
Ah,
I have
okay.
found that whenever I finish a book, I suddenly realized that I was writing about some part of myself, even if I wasn't fully
Wow.
aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that especially with my new book, Spells for Lost Things.
Oh.
My husband's reading it and he was like, "Oh, you were writing about like all of your like this is about you. These are about like your things." That there's one character in particular who I really relate to. Um, but most everything is just fictional from my imagination. But I am definitely very inspired by setting. So that's something that I've leaned on and spent a lot of time researching.
Yeah, and it's very clear in your writing. So now let's get into your new book, or at least the things we can talk about your new book. So, like, without spoilers, what can we expect from it? I know it's going to be in Salem, so that's very
Hmm.
interesting.
Yes. So this is my first book outside of Europe.
Yeah.
Um, and I really kept a similar element of
Mm-hmm.
exploring and traveling to a new place. I can't seem to get away from that theme. I enjoy it so much. Spells for Lost Things is my first dual point of view book. It's from a
Oh,
boy's
okay.
and a girl's perspective. It was interesting when I first started writing the book, I assumed it would just be from the girl's perspective, and
Mm-hmm.
immediately I could hear this boy's voice. And I adored writing this character. His name is Mason. Um, so basically, both these characters have their own trajectories and they end up kind of colliding together in Salem,
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts. Willow is in a family that has been divided for a long time, and she is obsessed with travel. She feels like she doesn't have a home, and she thinks if I can just get out in the world, I'm going to figure out where I belong.
Ah.
And her mother is aloof, kind of absent, and then Willow gets the news that her mom needs to settle in a state in Salem. And once they
Oh.
get there, Willow's going to learn more about her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mason is a boy in foster care. His mother has been a drug addict since he was very young, and he is in a new home placement in Salem. And his main goal is to get back to his mother. So two of them kind of wind up together. They end up solving a mystery together. Their love
Oh.
story, I think, is really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the setting with kind of like it's not fantasy. It's still a
Mm-hmm.
contemporary
Mm-hmm.
novel, but it definitely has some elements of magic that I really,
I'm
really
sure.
enjoyed writing. Anyway, I'm very excited about this book. It was definitely a jump for me skill wise.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a lot longer. It's much more complex than my previous books, and I'm very excited for it to head out into the world.
Hearing you talk about it, I'm so excited to read it because, like, from the first time I heard the title, Spells for Lost Things, I was like, wow, I wish I had a spell for lost things. And that already, like, got my attention. So, okay,
Good.
definitely gonna be looking forward to that. Now, back to the Love and series, actually. Will there be another one? Like, will there be another coming up? Or if there was any other place you'd like to write about for the Love and series, what would it be?
The place I think about really often right now is Iceland. I think that would be
Oh,
such a fascinating place. I
yeah.
found this hotel there. It's called like the Million Star Hotel or
Mm-hmm.
something. You basically like sleep in a bubble so you can
Oh,
watch the
yeah,
night
yeah.
sky all night. I don't know if you've seen
Oh,
photos of
yes,
that.
I have.
So, so that's a place that has definitely captured my imagination. I don't have plans right now to
Mm-hmm.
continue the Love and series, but I think it's possible. So I don't know. I definitely really enjoyed um writing about travel, and that series
Mm-hmm.
has been successful and really fun. But it I did feel at the time that it was time for me to try something new, and I think that was really good for me as an
Yeah, of
artist.
course. Congratulations on Love and Gelato becoming a movie as well. Like, I saw it recently. I saw how happy you were with the outcome of the scenes and stuff. So how does it feel seeing your work translated for the screen?
So I was
Mm-hmm.
totally hands off on the film.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have any input on it,
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, I saw it just a couple of weeks before it came out.
Oh, okay.
So it was, I mean, definitely a dream come true. It was something that
Mm-hmm.
I'd always hoped for. My readers certainly had a mixed reaction to it.
Yeah.
But the film did extremely well. It
Mm-hmm.
was like number two in the world
Mm-hmm.
the week that it came out. And I feel like I have found so many new readers, which has been really,
Yeah,
really
yeah. Mm-hmm.
fantastic. I also really thought that the actors that were cast were really sweet. They were really
Oh.
excited about it. I think they did a really, really good job. So it was quite the experience. And I'm really happy to have found so many new readers.
That's great. All right. So, lately, like for the past 2 years, how have you been finding yourself connecting with your readers? Apart from, of course, releasing books.
Lots of time on Instagram,
Of course.
or emails. It's been harder, like not being able to see people in person quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
I did do a book tour in Brazil this
Oh.
summer, and that was the first time I've been around a lot of readers in a really
Mm-hmm.
long time, and it was really helpful to me, like very encouraging. I was like, oh yeah, there really are real people who are reading my book, because you see like numbers or you see like books sold, and sometimes I think it's easy to forget, like, oh no, these are like actual people who,
Mm-hmm.
have your book in their home. Um, so I'll be doing some like signings and different thing in a few festivals this fall, which is nice. I feel like I'll be able to see people in person again. But I've definitely always received like emails and messages online, and those have always meant a lot to me, especially from some of the younger readers.
Of course.
Especially because I feel like it takes a lot of courage to
Mm-hmm.
write to someone. I would have been very nervous to do that as a young person, so I always appreciate that.
Um, what's a piece of advice that you found helpful to you, like in your career as a writer?
Um, so I stumbled on this advice a little bit later than I wish that I had,
Mm-hmm.
but I wish this is the advice someone had sat me down and told me very early on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I think it's important to remember, if you're starting out as a writer, if you, I'm as many, I think most people who want to be writers are probably similar to me, meaning they read like crazy. They know
Yeah.
good literature, they know good books, they know what they want to create. So I think it's important to remember that there's going to be a big gap between your abilities and your
Mm.
taste, if
Oh,
that makes sense.
okay.
So like when I started out writing, my taste level was extremely high because I had read so much. I knew what I liked. I knew what was good. But when I was writing, I was still down here, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
my ability was still pretty low because I was
Mm-hmm.
just starting out. I was just learning. And for a long time, there was actually a period of many years that I completely stopped writing because it was just so painful to me. And I assumed,
Mm.
oh, I just don't have what it takes to write the books I want to write. What I didn't understand is that the only way to like close that gap is to actually do the work, is to keep writing and to keep going. And I was very, very, very lucky. My dad's a writer as well, and he was the one who
Oh.
really pushed me into continuing. Um, so, I think that remembering that you're not going to be as good as you want to
Mm-hmm.
be, and to be honest, that's probably a good thing because I've met many writers who can't see the flaws in their work, and that would be really, really difficult to
Yeah,
progress.
yeah.
It would be really hard if you couldn't see where you want to go. And honestly, for me, I still feel like I'm not even close to where I want to be as a writer. I still have a long ways to go, but the only way to get there is to write.
That's very good advice, actually, especially like I guess for me, I'm in a creative course. So that's something that me, my batchmates, my course mates should keep in mind. And it was never really put that way. So thank you for giving it to us like that this early
Yeah,
while we're still
absolutely.
studying. So to become a writer also, would you say that there are things you need to learn? Like, are there technical things to becoming an author? Like, would you say do you have to study for it, or is it something that can just happen? Is it something that you can just get by building experience?
Yeah.
Mm.
Writing a book, I think for me, the most helpful thing I think I ever did was read a lot.
Yeah.
I think that that's the way I truly learned how to write and
Mm-hmm.
how I learned story structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I didn't know very much about how books are like books plots or
Mm-hmm.
how things really worked. I hadn't studied very much when I wrote Love and Gelato. And now when I go back and look at it, I realize that I followed actually the formula very
Mm-hmm.
well. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason that the book did well. So it wasn't until my second book when I really struggled through writing Love and Luck. It was
Mm-hmm.
very challenging, which is a very common experience for writers.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called the second book curse, where the second book is
Oh.
always more challenging. Yeah. I think it's because you suddenly realize like, oh, people are maybe going to read this, right? And there's more pressure on you and you have less time and it's just scarier. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe with your first book, you spent 10 years on it and now you have like a year on the second one. Um, so I didn't really learn much
Mm-hmm.
until my second and third novels. I think that it can be really, really helpful to learn about story structure.
Mm-hmm.
I actually studied movies for a long time.
Oh, wow.
Um, it's really, really fascinating because I think in our minds we think like, oh, I don't want to follow a formula because I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
formulaic.
Yeah.
But when we miss aspects of the formula, our brains know, and we get kind of like
Mm-hmm.
it's not satisfying to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely recommend like studying how stories work. Um, and making sure you hit kind of all the right
Mm-hmm.
beats. So I'm kind of a
Mm-hmm.
loose
Beats.
plotter. Like I don't plan out everything. That's never worked well for me. I wish I could,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not how my creative process works. But I do really try to like hit specific points
Mm-hmm.
in my books so that there's like the right amount of drama and change and that they're satisfying to the reader. So I don't know. I think reading is the most important thing. And then also
Mm-hmm.
knowing you're just going to have to write a lot, like a lot, a
Yeah.
lot. And it will probably start out not great. I mean, this book I've thrown out so many words on it, but I just have to keep at this point I know my process well enough to know that I just have to keep going and I'll eventually end up with what I like. Um but it's frustrating to throw out so much in the beginning, I think.
Okay, you talked about the second book curse. What about writer's block? What are the things you do to get out of writer's block?
So I think the thing with writer's block is that what's actually going on is you probably have a block in your life. Like if you're too stressed or you're too
Yeah.
tired or,
Oh, okay.
like I think that's usually like there's probably something else going on that you need to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's also important to know that writing is not this like there are moments that feel kind of magical to me, but it's not this magical, mystical thing. It's mostly a lot of hard work. Um, and I think getting used to that, like some days it doesn't come easy. I think a lot of the time it doesn't feel easy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of trudging through. So I think making sure you are healthy in all ways. You're taking care of your mental and emotional health, physical health. And then also just kind of pushing through the hard days is the best way to handle it.
No one has ever put it into that perspective for me. Oh,
Mm.
if there's a block in your writing, there's probably a block somewhere else in your life. Like that was never a perspective that was presented to me. So now I'm going to be looking at my writing very differently. That's great. So excuse me, sorry, the cough. Okay, so next up, I actually saw discourse on your Instagram regarding who had the better boy. Was it Ren or was it the one that lived
Theo.
and Theo? Yes, or was it
Hmm.
Theo? So,
Hmm.
and I saw that you said it was Theo in your Instagram.
Yes. I feel like a lot of people have very strong
Yeah.
feelings about Ren. So I was like, I can't
Yeah.
fight you guys on this. I do really, really love
Mhm.
the character Theo, though.
Mhm.
I think that
He's very charming.
he's very
Very
charming, but I
charming.
think he also gives Liv a lot of space.
Yeah, yeah.
Which now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that he's a lot like my husband. So that's
Oh,
probably
there you go.
why I love him. He's very supportive and also gives
Mhm.
me like the space I need and allows me to
Aw.
kind of come to my own conclusions, even if maybe he
Mhm.
understands maybe a step or two ahead what I'm headed towards. So yeah, I guess that's why I said that. I also
Oh,
like that
that's so sweet. Mhm.
I also like that he likes Liv's dad so much and he's able
Mhm.
to see not so like
Yeah.
black and white, like
Mhm.
he's able to
That's so true.
see the father as like a full person. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Oh gosh, until now, I'm also deciding like, oh, who do I like more? Because I remember I loving Ren's personality, but there was a different level of comfort that Theo provided in the book. Of course, yeah. In the topic of writing once again, were there ever any happy accidents that made it into the book? Like things that you weren't expecting to put in the book, like things that could have just been placeholders but ended up being like nice, or characters that were meant for other books that ended up finding their way into this book?
oh man, okay, I'm gonna have to think about that.
No problem.
I know, let's see. With each book, I felt like there were a couple of scenes that showed up very easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like in Love and Luck, I remember very clearly um picturing the moment when Addie is running to Lena. I don't know if you remember that scene, but basically Lena is talking about her friendship with Addie and how she's always been there for her. Um, and how one night she called from the hospital, her mom was dying, and
Mm-hmm.
Addie ran so fast to get
Yeah.
to the hospital that she forgot her shoes and she was
Mm-hmm.
running barefoot down the hallway. I feel like in all the books there were like a couple of scenes like that that just
Mm-hmm.
showed up kind of like for free.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest I had to like work really hard around. Um I feel like I'm not answering your question exactly, but I
It's
did have a
fine.
really
Mm-hmm.
interesting coincidence with my new book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had originally decided to set it in Sedona, Arizona, which is a
Oh,
city that
okay.
is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to me. It's very like mystical. It attracts a lot of people who are interested in spirituality. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is a house in this book that's really an important part of the story, and I could not find that house in Sedona. I kept like
Ah.
researching and I'm like, I just can't figure out like where it would be. Like I know that this is a big part of the
Mhm.
story and I can't figure it out. When I decided to set it in Salem, I actually went to Salem and I booked a
Mhm.
hotel, and there is a bunch of scenes on a rooftop and they said, do you want to see the roof of the hotel? And I went up and I realized I was looking at what I'd been picturing.
Ah,
It like gives me chills to think about still. It was so
mhm.
exactly what I'd had in my mind and so what I was looking for, and it made me feel like, I don't know, there's like little bits of magic to stories, like it's almost like you're like remembering something. I don't
Yeah,
know, I
yeah.
don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I've had a couple of things like that where things just showed up when I needed them to, and that's been really
Perfect.
cool.
There is magic in that happening at any point in life. Like something you just need, and all of a sudden, a solution just presents itself, or the feeling of things just falling into place.
Exactly.
Right. So, I wish I had magic for that. So, okay. Our time together is almost up, and I want to bring the advice question to a little more specific level before we call it a day. So,
Sure.
okay, this time, a piece of writing advice that can actually become life advice. So that could just be something. I think singers have told me, find your light, take a deep breath before that. Directors have said, take a step back. So, what about for a writer in writing? What is that piece of writing advice that makes very good life advice?
Hmm. I'm thinking of a lot of things, but
No problem.
I think um like give yourself space.
Give yourself
Allow
space.
yourself allow yourself to evolve on the page.
Mm,
Allow yourself to grow and be okay with your own pace. Whatever that looks
wow.
like for you. Like you'll grow in the ways that you need to. And as long as you're showing up, you'll get it right.
Nice, nice. I really needed to hear that. All right. So, what's next for Miss Jenna Evans Welch? You can talk about your book and the things that you're allowed to say.
Yeah.
Give us a
So
refresher.
what's next for me
Hmm.
is this book coming out, Spells for Lost Things. It'll be out in the US end of this month. I am not sure where you are, what the publishing schedule is. I should probably check that out.
No
Um,
problem.
and then from there, I don't know. Kind of have some space to explore, and I'm going to be taking a minute to kind of decide. Of course, I have a lot of story ideas crowding up, but I am kind of giving them some breathing room at the moment. So right now, I'm just focusing on releasing this book, and then I don't know. We'll see from there.
We're looking forward to it. Hopefully, we get it on our side of the world soon. Hopefully, I'm praying. Okay, before we say goodbye, to you, to our audience, allow me to please thank a few people first. So, once again, this has been New Wave. So, thank you to Sir Justin for handling this broadcast. Thank you once again to our audience for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Now, don't miss out. Follow us on Instagram at newwave.rk to stay updated. Head over to our Facebook page called New Wave and join the Facebook community group on the page for replays, additional content, engagements, and ways you could get featured on the show. So the links will be pasted in the comments, so go check that out. Catch the replay of this episode on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM's Facebook page, YouTube, and Twitter Live, all of which go by at Radyo Katipunan. Now, don't forget that you can also listen to this episode and many more as a podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor under the name New Wave. But most of all, thank you to our guest, Miss Jenna Evans Welch, for spending time with us today. This has been months in the making, and I'm so happy we could finally carry this out. I told this to her off air, but her book, especially Love and Gelato, means so much to me. In high school, when my batch went to Italy, we really treated her book like our guide. So, it's meant so much to us all these years, and it still means so much to us now. So, really, thank you for spending time with us today. So, the
Thank you
floor
so
is
much.
yours.
That
The
was a
floor.
wonderful
Thank
interview. Thank
you.
you so much for all those thoughtful
Thank
questions. It was
you.
really lovely to be here.
Thank you. So the floor is yours. Anything for the audience? Drop your socials, promo.
Sure, absolutely. I am mostly on Instagram. I love Instagram. I think it's such a positive
It
and
is.
colorful space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there at Jenna Evans Welch. I'm very active on there. You can always email me, jenna.e.welch@gmail.com. And I am so happy to know that my book is being read on the other side of the world. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your support. And I'm so happy that the stories have reached all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So once again, I'm Max, and when it comes to what's happening, I'll serve you the facts. And this has been New Wave. We'll see you.
Bye.